We come now to motion number 4, relating to the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. I have provisionally selected the following amendments, colleagues, in the following order. C, in the name of the Right Honourable Member for Meriden, Dame Caroline Spelman. I remind the House that reference may be made in debate to any of the amendments on the paper, including those which I have not selected. A very great relief to the House to hear Dame Caroline Spelman.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting to be called quite so early in the debate today, and so therefore I'd prepared a relatively short speech, having been conditioned by the time limits that have usually pertained in these debates. So I don't expect to detain the House too long with my observations. But I would just like to begin by picking up where the Right Honourable Gentleman for the Opposition left off. I did think in his final words he did acknowledge that something important has changed. And actually, it was his right honourable friend, the member for Birkenhead, who did actually intervene much earlier in the debate to say that the atmosphere is changing. And I think he is quite right about this, because the pragmatism and the courage that the Prime Minister showed yesterday in making her statement is indeed a very important change. And I would also like to welcome the BrExit Secretary's recognition that when my amendment carried on the 29th of January, Parliament demonstrated a clear majority against no deal. I listened very carefully to him speaking on the Today programme this morning on Radio 4, and he set out that if this majority should be restated the day after a meaningful vote, if it doesn't carry before the 12th of March, Parliament will have an opportunity to vote on an extension to Article 50 the following day, so I'm pleased now to see that the will of Parliament will be respected. And I do agree with the Deputy Prime Minister, absolutely, that the best way to avoid a no-deal Brexit is to vote for a deal. I did just this on the 15th of January, and I will do so again when a deal is next put. And I really do appeal to colleagues across the House to do the same. Agreeing a deal would help to ensure an orderly Brexit, and this is essential to protect jobs. I have been absolutely simple and consistent on the motivation that I have taken towards this subject, which is to protect the jobs and livelihoods of my constituents and those of honourable colleagues. I give way.
Equal to the Honourable Lady for giving way. The Prime Minister has indeed repeated ad nauseam that the way to avoid no deal is to vote for a deal. Isn't it the case that the way to avoid Parliament voting against a deal would have been to talk to Parliament a year ago to find out what kind of deal might be acceptable to the vast majority of members in this House?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as an experienced former commercial negotiator, and I know that my honourable friend, the member for Erdington, is one of those as well, one thing you do learn about difficult negotiations of this kind, it's no good harping on about the past. You have to focus on the future, you have to be relentlessly optimistic and bring goodwill to the table. But back to the subject that is really closest to my heart, I sounded the alarm months ago about the risks to the car industry of a no-deal Brexit. Many workers in my constituency have already lost their jobs, and more recently we heard the sad news about Nissan and Honda. The loss of jobs is devastating, but far more will be risked if auto manufacturers leave these shores. The chairman of Unipart, John Neal, said in the weekend Financial Times, if we lose the automotive industry, we lose one of the most powerful drivers of productivity and a powerful source of industrial innovation. The UK is now the 9th biggest manufacturing country in the world, and we just cannot afford to lose this critical industry. A no-deal Brexit does not just threaten car makers. Last night, representatives from the CBI, Next, Bosch, Ford, the TUC, Make UK, which was formerly the EEF, the Food and Drink Federation, the Investment Association and Virgin Media, to name but a few, spoke to a large number of MPs at an event here in Parliament. All these organisations fear the chaos of a no deal and implored parliamentarians to come together and agree a deal. So for those colleagues who think that leaving without a deal is in the national interest, they must answer the concerns of the industries that millions of jobs depend on. Chris Cummings, the Chief Executive of the Investment Association, which represents firms collectively managing around £7 trillion, told MPs last night that £19 billion has left the United Kingdom since the referendum. They can measure that because those are their members. The current run rate of this capital flight is approximately £2.4 billion each month. So the notion that no deal has already been priced into the markets is just simply not true. The full consequences have not yet been accounted for. The human cost of no deal is not just jobs and livelihoods today, which are very, very important, especially in constituencies like mine, but they will also impact the value of people's pensions and savings for the future. And, Mr. Speaker, since I've just touched on the pensioners, can I just come back to one point which is relevant to Amendment B, which I know that my right honourable friend has said the government is going to accept. But if colleagues might recall, I sounded the alarm also about the plight of UK pensioners living in other EU countries, especially the provisions for their health care. And if the United Kingdom were to leave the EU without a deal, then, as my right honourable friend said, at present the provisions are not in place to make sure their health care would be paid for. So could I just suggest to my right honourable colleagues that, given the size of the contingency fund of taxpayers' money that the government has had to make available for the risk of a no-deal Brexit, some portion of that might actually be considered to bridge the gap of the UK citizens who are already getting letters from the authorities in Italy, in Germany, in France, in Spain, to warn them that from the 29th of March their healthcare costs will not be covered, because that is a source of real anxiety and human cost to those people concerned. So, Mr. Speaker, businesses did cautiously welcome the Prime Minister's announcement yesterday, which took away the threat of no deal, or capacity to take away the threat of no deal, on the 29th of March. And the Director of the CBI described it as a glimpse of sanity. She called on the government to permanently rule out no deal to provide the certainty that business needs. This would de-risk the situation and create the space to secure a pragmatic deal. Mr. Speaker, people often confuse risk and uncertainty, because if you have a binary choice between a deal or no deal with 15 days to go, it's a very high-risk situation which creates uncertainty. So the pragmatic response of the Prime Minister yesterday helps to reduce that risk and creates the space, then, to secure a deal. The contingency planning for no deal has already cost business millions and the taxpayer billions. If I just take one example, Pfizer alone has spent £90 million on no-deal preparations. This is money they cannot invest or direct to the front line, and it will in the end result in jobs being lost. The Federation of Small Business reports that 85% of its members are not ready for no deal. Actually, as somebody mentioned earlier, very small businesses don't have the capacity to prepare for a no-deal scenario in quite the way some of the larger ones can. Last night's publication of the government's assessment of the state of preparedness for a no-deal didn't really provide a lot of reassurance on that front. So this is a time to be pragmatic. The Prime Minister has given us a lead. She's being pragmatic. And to deliver an orderly Brexit, we do need to come together across the parties to try and get a deal over the line. And I think if we don't this, we're going to fail our nation. And really, if MPs can't bring themselves to put the national interest first at a time like this, then they should consider the greatest risks we face to security, freight delays, air traffic control, visas, food, medicine and energy shortages, as I mentioned, UK citizens' healthcare in the EU, scientific research and educational exchange. We've heard more and more of what these are, and all of this disruption will directly impact and is impacting the people that we represent. As was demonstrated on 29th of January, there's a clear majority to rule out no deal. I would expect this majority to increase when the next opportunity presents. However, we can't just stand against something. We must urgently build a consensus for a deal that we stand for in the British national interest. It's clear that business needs a deal to deliver frictionless trade and customs cooperation. And I just really ask, are the parties in this place really so far apart regarding some form of customs partnership? The Conservative Party manifesto at the last general election contained the phrase, a special relationship based on a customs arrangement. The official opposition is calling for a customs union. I feel that we are within touching distance if there is a determined effort to reach consensus. I give way.
Thank you very much indeed. I would be delighted to hear the Right Honourable Lady encourage the front bench to confirm that she and her honourable and right honourable colleagues will be allowed a free vote in the event that when we have a meaningful vote again before the middle of March, and if the Prime Minister doesn't win that meaningful vote, will the Conservative government allow its members to have a free vote in such a significant situation to take no deal definitely off the table on the following day?
Well, Mr. Speaker, really, she's, Right Honourable Lady is putting her request through me to the government. I can't commit the government to that. But what I would say to honourable and right honourable members is it's quite clear to us in this place that these aren't normal political times. I don't envy the job of our Chief Whip. It must be one of the most difficult jobs on the planet at the moment. And the main parties have difficulty with the normal way that we would operate. And much of what has been achieved by building cross-party alliances. And actually, I think the public actually feel reassured when they see this happen. Leastways, that is what members of the public in my constituency and members of my party have told me. They like to see us working together in the national interest to try and bring about a resolution to this process, because we need it sooner rather than later. So, Mr. Speaker, with goodwill and determination, I believe we can get there. We can secure the new relationship with Europe that people voted for. We will enjoy trading on preferential terms with our largest market, whilst being outside the constraints of the EU institutions, which many object to today. That is what over 17 million people voted for, and that reality is now within our grasp. Whether Brexit is delivered on the 29th of March or delayed for a few months, and I'm no great fan of an extensive delay, delay is uncertainty, delay costs business money. I really do get that. It is up to us to back a deal that delivers certainty and protects prosperity and work. So I therefore urge colleagues of all parties carefully to consider the amendments before the House today, but more than that. As debate continues in this place, we must now work more closely together than ever before to deliver Brexit. I beg to conclude.